Thank you so much for coming to this event this evening. I am really honored to be here, and I'm just overwhelmed by this beautiful city and the exhibition that you have been able to inspire in this museum. And I would like to say that the exhibition is not an ordinary experience. It is an extraordinary experience in many ways. It is historical in many ways. I would be bold to say that you will not find any African art show like this anywhere on this planet. It is truly historic for several reasons. One is that this is a college museum that encourages experiments. And we have moved as far as we can, theoretically, in terms of putting together this exhibition. And this has been possible only because of the receptive spirit of the director, the curators, and when Sean asked me to do an exhibition of African art using the collection available here, I didn't think I wanted to do it because I know that museums all over the world, in Africa, in Europe, in the Americas, in Asia, already have an idea of what African art should look like. And it is very simple. These wooden objects that are associated with tribes, and you look at them and they have no connection with you because they belong to a distant culture and another time. And you look at them and you begin to think about for what magic is this work used? For what religion is it used? And they were never collected as art to begin with. In the history of collecting works from Africa, the idea was not to collect art objects. The idea was to collect materials from the colonies of Europe as ways through which these the European powers could demonstrate the cultures to which they have traveled. So many of the works were not picked to begin with because people found them to be creative expressions. And this usually is also the way the works were displayed. As a matter of fact, it took the genius of Western art, the best of the best minds in Western art, Picasso, to rediscover these objects where they were located, where they were dumped. When Picasso went to the Trocadero Museum in Paris, I'll try and, I can't quote him directly, but he said he went into this museum and he said the first thing that hit him was the smell of the objects. And then he looked at the objects. He said, at first, he didn't even want to go in. He said they were all just lumped together. They were just all over the place. No labeling, nothing. Unlike what he's used to in African art, in Western art, in which an object is displayed and given space, and another object is displayed, and there are nice little labels and so on, and you can see that the work belongs to a creative sensibility, and you can study the work in terms of the creative genius that produced it. And he says he went into this museum and he just wanted to go right back. He said, but when he looked at it, something held him there. He said, I couldn't move. I couldn't move. And he said he wanted to find out what it was that made him so unable to move. And he stepped closer and he said, oh, these are weapons. They are weapons. They are weapons to fight things. And at that time, he was also beginning to think of art in terms of using it to engage the society, using it as a means of demonstrating certain sociological issues that concerned him. And he said, now, I've found the weapon. I've found what I can use. He said, for the first time, he understood the meaning of art. And he knew how he was going to be able to go back and translate this language as a weapon. So, unfortunately, many of the museums that have collected African art objects do not have that ability, that gift, that talent to read art as a visual language. Children can read things. And I was coming, when I was on the plane this morning, there were lots of kids in the plane, and they were talking, you know, baby bubbles. And it's like music. They were just producing these things naturally, these sounds, vowels and consonants, and just combining them. And those kids, everything, when they see anything, they can read those things naturally and impulsively. But by the time we grow up, we lose that ability because we've been told that's a tree, that's a house, that's a brick. This is what you look for. This is what you don't look for. We are instructed by culture in such a way that we lose the original ability, that natural gift to actually be able to see One of the things I tell my students when I do introduction to art, I make lines like this. I say, what is that? And they say, it's a cross. It's the axis, the 4 cardinal points, the plus sign. I said, no, it's just 2 lines. 2 lines, but you can't see them any longer as 2 lines because you've been instructed that whenever you see those things, this is what you're looking at. It's not that this is what I can see any longer. This is what you are supposed to see. So that has robbed us as adults of the ability to actually see again, to see things through our own eyes. And so when I was asked to do this exhibition, as someone who has curated African art before, I know that the usual experience is to walk right through the gallery. People come in, and then they walk right through and take 1 or 2 looks at the things. Doesn't say anything to them, and they go right out. Because they are looking at knives, they are looking at things that they've been told specifically, this is what you are supposed to see. And that is why the Belgian painter, René Magritte, in 1928, did this painting, The Treachery of Images. He painted a pipe and says, writes at the bottom of it, this is not a pipe. It is paint of different colors, flat, on a background. That's what you're looking at. You're not looking at a pipe. You can't smoke with this. So that crisis of visual reading, if you can't even read works from your own culture, how can you now? How can I, as a curator, expect you to be able to read works from another culture? So when Sean told me, do this exhibition, I said, okay, we'll do it, but we are going to do it differently. We're going to do it like no other exhibition on this planet. Are you going to let me do that? I said, yes. Okay, let's do it. To do it, we need to bring other artists into this show to create a new visual language for Africa. And that is what you're going to see. I was a curator at the Denver Art Museum, as Vicky said, for 10 years. And I did an installation in one of the most amazing buildings by Daniel Libeskind. I don't know if you are familiar with the work of Daniel Libeskind. Libeskind did this building for Denver Art Museum in which there is not a single 90-degree, thank you, in which there is not a single 90-degree angle. Everything inclines. And all of the curators said, no, we can use this building. And then they went in and built walls, more or less obscuring the building. For me, it was an opportunity to actually show work in a strange environment that would challenge people to actually begin to look at work. But let's not talk without images. So let's start with the work with his writer. Her name is Nneji Okorafor. She is a science fiction writer, or that is the way she's described. What she's doing is considered science fiction, but what she really is doing is writing the way in which in indigenous African cultures people understand life in a situation in which life is mysterious. We don't have a language for everything. We don't have meaning for everything. Not everything can be understood. Not everything is even meant to be understood. Not everything has a name. Not everything can be named, because language is so powerful. If your name is Tom and you are in the middle of a crowd and someone wants to capture your spirit, and the person says, Tom, you turn. It's caught your attention. It has a name for you. And from that moment, the person can use words to make you feel good or make you feel very bad. Just words. So the power of word, of naming, of understanding things. But as Okorafor would say, not everything can be understood. And the idea of science fiction is actually not science fiction. It's just ordinary life in which language is used to describe the complexities and possibilities of life. And this is what African artists have done forever. Understanding that not everything can be understood. Not, if you say, I don't understand this is mysterious, it is not necessarily a bad thing. But the experience of the museum has been to try and label African art with specific things, to try and understand it, to try and specify it, to put it in some kind of category in ways that are contrary to the spirit of the artist who made this work out of the wonder of life itself. So she began to use the medium of science fiction as a way to try and tell the stories of Africa. Because she understands that telling the story of Africa is not a neutral experience. What you tell depends on who you are, and the way people understand it also depends on who they are. So the power of language versus meaning makes it important for Africans to tell their own stories. And this is the opportunity that the museum presented to me and to us, for someone to tell the story of Africa, not necessarily from the perspective of someone looking in, but also from the perspective of somebody looking out. So, art is a means of understanding Africa, and art can also become a means of distorting the meaning of Africa. Art can be used as a way of narrating the history of Africa. And this is what you're going to find when you go into the museum. Art as a means of narrating the history of Africa, but in a way that is subjective, is intentionally subjective, because all history, after all, is subjective. It's all about picking and highlighting what interests the writer or the historian. And art as the language of Africa. So, one of the things I do, or one of the things we've done in this exhibition, is to show the complexity of Africa as an experience, not Africa as frozen in some imaginary of this is what Africa should be, but what Africa really is. So one of the artists we have used for the exhibition is Denenge Ape. How is she an African artist? Her mother is white. Her father is Nigerian. But she grew up in Nigeria and moved to America and considers herself as having an African visual language. She's Africa. There isn't one way of thinking about Africa. Africa is a complex story. Africa is a multifarious experience. She speaks of herself as an Afrofuturist. In other words, she uses her art as a means of traveling through time. She sees herself as unifying the past, the present, and the future. And not simply for the sake of it, but as a means of referencing transformation, as a means of referencing revolution, and as a means of introducing innovation. There is the principle of Aristotle in terms of trying to attain catharsis, to unify time, space, and action, the unity of time, space, and action. For Denenge, she moves beyond that idea of unifying time, space, and action. She can play with it. She can explore the fantasy within it. She can explore all kinds of possibilities. And this work she calls, is part of a series that she calls Mystical Creatures, Wounded Octopus. But the reason for exploring the concept of wounded octopus is in many ways deliberate. The idea of wound, to heal that wound, and the octopus as mysterious, something that lives inside water, that has many hands, unlike human, that has a head that's joined to the body in ways that are not human. but at the same time, that could help us to understand ourselves better if we were to study these characters. So her work is also about healing. So, if we can envision the future, why can't we envision change? Why is it possible? Why is it impossible to think about change? Why is change so difficult in society, especially change that is therapeutic, change that is about healing our society now? Contemporary time is a time that is wounded in many ways. All our experiences every day, all over the world, is that of trauma, fear of terrorism. It's everywhere, all over the planet right now. It's a culture, it's a time that is wounded. Why can't we envision change? And she explores these possibilities of the future as means of addressing the possibilities of change. If we can imagine it, we can do it. She says, if she conceives of an object that does not exist, she can build it. So, if society knows what is good, why can't we build it? It's a kind of challenge. But at the same time, there is always the element of fantasy. An artist is not just ideological, it's not just political. An artist also plays. And this is what you'll find throughout the exhibition, the idea of play, of fantasy, of being a child again, the innocence of these bubbles that has endless possibilities. Alchemy, turning trash to treasure, pain to pleasure, poverty to wealth, violence to peace. That's the idea of alchemy. So, these gold nuggets floating, she made them up. So, we can fantasize about what life should be and then make it possible. We are alchemists. Another artist in the exhibition is Akirash. This is an installation she did for us at the University of Texas, Austin. Denenge talks about herself as a sculptor of space. Akirash describes himself as an architect of time in a conceptual way. So someone buys an object in a package, uses that object and discards the package. Akirash goes and takes it up. So something that has been discarded, he now picks up and uses it again in a way that now tells a story of two users over time. So there's a passage of time that he's sculpting with the object and rearranging the objects in ways to gain new meanings. And he calls this Shopping List 2014. And at the same time, he is describing the anatomy of consumption. What is it that we consume? Because what we consume describes us. Plastic spoons. You will go to, they already know him in Texas. He goes to all of these restaurants, and they already collect all of their trash for him. Things, plastic things that have been discarded and will be thrown into the waste bin. And he would pick, they would pack them for him, and he would use them and rearrange them into this fabric, something that seems done, something that seems spent. He now gives hope, brings hope to this thing, gives new possibilities, describes the endlessness of the possibilities of things that seem finished. And these are metaphors, these are proverbs for us, for people, the things that we think have no meaning, have no use, are wasted, are spent. Those things can actually become new things. They can be reborn, they can be regenerated, if we just think about them differently. If we can just find the means of reimagining those things. It could be people, especially people. And he talks about, in here, it's writing, it's about people. Ènìyàn láṣọ mi. People are my clothes. In other words, I'm nude. I am naked without people. The people, those that give me value, the things that cover me, are people. Society, culture. Think about it. We are not like flies. A fly can just hatch out of an egg and fly away and start life. But people have, when a baby is born, the baby has to be picked up, has to be washed carefully, has to be given milk, a baby must experience love. That is what we are. We need to feed on love. But as time goes on, we lose that sense of warmth. We no longer cherish it. And he says, children are clothes. Ọmọ láṣọ. Ọmọ láṣọ. That is from generation to generation. One generation covers the other one. Another artist you will find in the exhibition. I don't know how much time I have.
So it's 6:20 right now, so we need 10 more minutes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Another artist in the exhibition is Dada Arowogun. Usually when you go to an African art exhibition, you find the object and they give you the name of the tribe or the ethnic group. They tell you what it's for. You totally miss it. You can no longer see that object. You see, okay, it's a knife. Remember, René Magritte, this is not a knife. It is not a knife. If it were a knife, it wouldn't be in the museum. the essence of that thing is not that it is a knife. It is the power of creativity that the artist now conceals in what appears like a knife. It is not a knife. And if you were to go into the exhibition, you will see the way in which things that in many museums would be labeled knife, would be labeled untitled. You see that a lot in there, untitled, because the idea is we want you to inhabit that object with meaning yourself. Not that we call it a knife, no, because that's not what the artist was doing. The artist is a dreamer, is a transformer of materials from the ordinary to the extraordinary, to make you wonder, to make you see the infinity of things. And if we as a museum already say, this is a knife, we make it impossible for you to now use that material as a vehicle for transformation of imagination. So a lot of artists, especially modern artists, have the idea of untitled, is to enable you to move, to soar, to have a dialogue with the work itself on your own, as an individual, as a baby, more or less. So in the work, rather than say Yoruba, that's an African ethnic group or tribe, Yoruba, Congo, Dahomey, and so on and so forth. Tribes don't make work. Ethnic groups don't make work. Individuals make work. So when you go to a museum and you see Congo, of course they've misled you. No. There's an individual who sat down, who went to school to learn the process of transforming objects and who applied that to his or her own individual sensibility to create an object that speaks on a personal and psychological level. It is not a tribe. And that is what you find in our museums, in which they will just simply throw out the name of that tribe. They can't see the artist in that work. So rather than say tribe or ethnic group, in this exhibition, you'll find an unknown artist or an undocumented artist. In other words, he's an artist. We may not know this person. We may not have documented the name of this individual when we were collecting the work. It doesn't mean that that work was not made by somebody. And we honor that person even though we, for some reason, out of our own omission, did not take the necessary step to honor that artist by writing down the name of the artist when we collected the work. But in this case, we have a name. We did research. We found out who this artist is. His name is Dada Arowogu. And he's not just making work. If you actually begin to look at each of the platforms, you begin to see specific things. He's telling the story of a specific time that he witnessed. He's an individual who is expressing things that he saw, a time that he lived in, a time of crisis, a time of disintegration, a time of war. That's what he's showing here. He took the time to sculpt each of these registers. If we can take the time to also look we will see a lot of things in the work. You can see details now. It's somebody tied to somebody. Someone is holding them together. Someone is holding something that looks like a whip. Another is holding someone being sold to somebody. So, yeah, this is something emotional to this individual. He's witnessed the sale of people. He's not quite happy about it. And he's telling it, he's showing it. So we can say this is the work of a tribe. No, it's the painful expression of a person. And here, this is that. Does anybody know what that is? Sorry? Anybody?
Snail, turtle.
Snail and turtle. A snail trying to swallow a turtle. Of course, the snail cannot swallow a turtle. It's just going to create a stalemate. And that is what happened here in this war. A snail trying to swallow a turtle. Two animals. One thinking is powerful enough to be able to swallow the other, whereas the entire thing is if the snake tries to swallow a turtle, it will be impossible. And as the two of them struggle, a hunter would come and pick them up, both of them. So, in other words, we should pick our fights. We should be reasonable in whatever we do. So, these are individuals who are thinking. And that is the way you need to begin to read African art. Not, it's a knife. Of course, it's a door. It was made as a door, but it's not a door. It's an aesthetic statement. It's an historical statement. That's the artist. That's the sun. And this is what the sun did. It's also in the exhibition. It's a door that now continues to tell the story that his father told him. So it is now passed down from generation to generation, using more or less the same style, so that what you find here, you would probably also find here, but in a different medium, in a cylindrical medium. It's a drum, but you don't need all of this to have a drum, no. So it is not a drum. It is an aesthetic statement. It is a historical document. It is the sensibility of an individual. And we tend to think of African art as the work of black people. Africa is like America. It's multicultural. It has white people in it. It has Arabs in it. It has black people in it. So when we think about African art, it is multiracial. When I teach African art, I actually teach what is in Africa, not what I imagine Africa should be. So we have Minette Valley, South African artist. She does installation, she does videos. She's an African artist. She got into a lot of trouble when she did this work, self-portrait, in which she now brings the head of a black woman and wears it. on her own hair using video transformation. And, a lot of people got annoyed and so on and so forth. But artists do things to provoke conversations, sometimes to make us uncomfortable. Because unless we are a little uncomfortable, we don't want change. We can't even think about situations. So sometimes we have such circumstances. But I'm probably out of time. I'll stop so that you can. Sorry.
Maybe a few questions quickly. We wanted to allow enough time for us to experience Beneke as well. So.
Questions and comments, please. When you ask me the question, I'll repeat it because.
I was thinking that ancient Indian wisdom, the fact that knowledge is the true organ of sight, not the eye. I'm just wondering whether this exhibit is based on the idea that it is the sight rather than knowledge. And I'd like to clarify that.
That knowledge is built in society and not in art. Yes, the artist is also part of society though. The artist exists in society and is not an alien. So whatever knowledge exists in society is raw material for the artist to play with. Artists can be provocative intentionally, playing with that knowledge so that the knowledge is not stale. But we can actually even rediscover that knowledge to make it much more dynamic.